In 1781, a British ship threw 132 living human beings into the Atlantic Ocean. Not in a storm, not in an emergency, not by accident, by calculation. The captain gathered his officers. They sat around a table. They looked at the ship's insurance documents, and they made a business decision. The enslaved people on board were worth more dead than alive. If they died of disease, the insurance would not pay. But if they were thrown overboard, classified as a necessary sacrifice to save the ship, the insurance company would cover the loss. 132 people, thrown into the ocean, alive. And the court case that followed did not ask who murdered them. It asked who owed the money. The ship was called the Zong. It left the West African coast in August 1781 carrying 470 enslaved Africans. The ship was built to carry far fewer. People were packed into the hold in conditions that guaranteed disease would spread. Within weeks, illness had broken out. Enslaved people were dying. And Captain Luke Collingwood was doing mathematics. He understood something about British maritime insurance law that most people alive today do not know. Under the insurance policy covering the Zong, enslaved Africans who died of disease at sea were a loss the owners had to absorb themselves. But enslaved Africans thrown overboard to save the ship in an emergency were covered. The same as livestock. The same as any other cargo. If the captain could frame the murders as a necessary emergency decision, the insurance company would pay. 132 people had a higher monetary value dead in the ocean than dead in the hold. On November 29, 1781, the killing began. 54 people were thrown overboard on the first day, 42 more on the second day. On the third day, 36 more. 10 of those on the third day jumped themselves. They had heard what was happening. They chose the ocean. They chose the water over remaining on that ship. Let that sit with you for a moment. 132 people, 3 days. And when the Zong arrived in Jamaica shortly afterward, the captain filed an insurance claim. Not a murder report, an insurance claim for damaged cargo. The insurance company refused to pay, not because they believed murder had been committed, because they believed the captain had acted improperly and the claim was fraudulent. The ship owners sued. The case went to court in London in 1783. The case was called Gregson versus Gilbert. Not the Crown versus Collingwood. Not a murder trial. A commercial dispute. The judge, Lord Chief Justice Mansfield, ruled on the first hearing that the case was straightforward. He said, and these are words that were actually spoken in a British court of law, the case was the same as if horses had been thrown overboard. The same as horses. 132 human beings. Horses. A British abolitionist named Granville Sharp was in the public gallery that day. He heard those words. He left the courtroom and spent the rest of his life making sure the Zong was never forgotten. He contacted Olaudah Equiano, a formerly enslaved African living in London who had become one of the most prominent writers and activists of his generation. Equiano brought the case to Sharp. Sharp brought it to the public. They demanded murder charges. The British Attorney General reviewed the case. His conclusion was that no murder had been committed, because under British law in 1783, you could not murder cargo. Not one person on that ship was ever charged. Not one person was arrested. Not one person spent a single night in a cell for throwing 132 living human beings into the Atlantic Ocean. Captain Luke Collingwood died before the case was fully resolved. Of natural causes. In his bed. But something did come from the Zong. The horror of the case. The specific, undeniable, legally documented horror of a court treating the murder of over 100 people as a routine insurance dispute became one of the most powerful arguments the abolitionist movement ever had. Granville Sharp used it. William Wilberforce used it in Parliament. The artist J.M.W. Turner painted a vision of the ocean during a slave ship massacre, inspired by the Zong, that shocked Victorian Britain when it was exhibited in 1840, 59 years after the murders. The painting showed what the court documents had refused to acknowledge, that there were human beings in that water, that someone put them there, and that the institution that permitted it, the transatlantic slave trade, was not commerce. It was something else entirely. The British Parliament abolished the slave trade in 1807, 26 years after the Zong. Lloyd's of London, the insurance market that handled the original Zong policy, is still operating today, in the same city, under the same name. It issued a statement acknowledging its historical connection to the slave trade in 2020. A statement. No reparations. No compensation to the descendants of the 132. No fund. No memorial. No legal accountability. A statement, 239 years after the murders. And the descendants of those 132 people, if any survive to have descendants, have never received a single pound from the institution that processed the insurance claim on their lives. This is what deep research finds, not the history they put in the textbooks, not the version that makes the institutions look like they eventually did the right thing. The version where you follow the documents, where you read the court transcripts, where you find out what words were actually spoken and what judgments were actually made, and where you discover that the most disturbing part of the Zong Massacre is not the ocean. It is the paperwork. The calm, professional, legally formatted paperwork that processed 132 murders as a routine commercial transaction. Now I want to know something from you. Drop your country below right now. Where are you watching this from? Because the next story I am going to cover is going to come from your comments. Every country on Earth has a massacre that was buried. A court case that should have been a murder trial but became something else. A moment where human lives were treated as numbers on a document. And I want to know which one you want me to find. Tell me your country. Tell me the atrocity from your nation's history that the world has never fully heard. Or tell me which genocide or massacre from anywhere on Earth you want me to dig into next. Because we are just getting started with these hidden stories. And the next one I found, it makes the Zong look like something they actually tried to cover up. What I am about to show you is hidden in plain sight, in a document that has been publicly available for over a century. And nobody connected the dots until now. Share this video right now. Someone in your network has never heard the name Gregson versus Gilbert. Someone you know has never heard that a British court compared the murder of 132 people to throwing horses overboard. One share changes that. Find us on YouTube, search official The Odd Archive, and subscribe so nothing gets past you. And if this page has given you history that no classroom ever did, leave us a review on Facebook. It is the most powerful thing you can do to help this content reach the people who need to see it. Because the Zong was not an exception. It was the system working exactly as it was designed. And the next story proves it happened again. In a different ocean, with different paperwork, and the same result.